The Pyrenees, silent mountains, where clouds lie on the peaks like forgotten pages of history. Here, between Spain and France, lives a people whose mystery has not even been solved by the supercomputers of the 21st century. The Basques are like a shard of ancient Europe, surviving after catastrophes, changes of eras and peoples. Neither the Romans, nor the Moors, nor the Franks managed to dissolve them into themselves. Their faces seem to have been carved by the wind, and their language sounds as if it is older than speech itself. Archaeologists call these lands a genetic museum under the open sky. Every stone here is a witness of millennia, every valley an archive of blood. Scientists, biologists, and historians have debated for years. Who are they? Descendants of Neanderthals, ancient hunters, or a separate branch of humanity frozen in time? And why has their DNA resisted the currents of history, as if someone protected it from mixing? What if the Basques are not just a people, but the last reminder of what the first humans of Europe were like? They believe that everything began with fire. With the ancient goddess Marie, a woman living deep within the mountain. It is said that when she comes out, storms cover the peaks and lightning strikes the ground. Her companion, Sugar, is a celestial serpent, winding through the sky like the thread of fate. For the Basques, this is not just a legend. It is the code of their world, balance between earth and sky, light and darkness. Archaeologists find symbols in the caves that resemble traces of this cult. Spirals, fiery lines, female silhouettes. All of this is a language that appeared before words. It evokes not faith, but memory. Memory of a time when man and nature were one being, when thunder was the voice of the gods and rain was their breath. Scientists still cannot explain where these images came from, and why, right here amid stone and fog, have they survived for millennia? What if the myth of the goddess Mari is not a fairy tale, but a coded message from the ancestors that we are just beginning to understand? Deep underground, in the cool grottos of Altamira and Icain, the breath of the ancients still lives. There, where thousands of years ago the fire of torches flickered, the walls are covered with images of bulls, deer, buffalo. They were painted with ochre and charcoal, with fingers, when glaciers still moaned over Europe. These pictures are not art, but a prayer addressed to life. Scientists date them to 36,000 years before our era. And it is here, at the boundary of light and darkness, that humans first realized themselves not just as part of nature, but as its mirror. In layers of ash, archaeologists find charred bones, flint points, handprints, as signatures of the planet's first artists. The Basques live on the same land. Their blood carries the echo of these bonfires, the scent of smoke from those caves. It is as if time has frozen in the circle of mountains. What if these drawings are not just traces of the past, but a message left by the very beginning of Europe? As the ice retreated, the sea withdrew with it. The ground cracked, and herds of bison migrated further south. But here, in the Pyrenees, those who did not leave remained. People accustomed to living at the edge of cold. Their bones, found in the valleys, belonged to hunters who survived the catastrophe that wiped out half of Europe. They lived in caves, knew the smell of fire, understood the language of the wind. They believed that every stone breathes. They had no cities, no writing, but they had a memory that they passed down through blood. This line has not been broken, from the Ice Age to our days. Research shows the genetic continuity of the Basques lasts for 10,000 years. No other people in Europe has managed to maintain such a long chain. They are the last witnesses of that era when survival meant loyalty to the land. What if it is in their veins that flows the blood of the first people who saw Europe thawing? Around 8,000 years ago, everything changed. New people arrived in Europe, farmers from the Middle East. They brought grains, livestock, and a different rhythm of life. Everywhere, ancient hunters disappeared, dissolving into the newcomers, losing their language and genes. Everywhere, except for one place. In the cave of El Portalón, near Burgos, archaeologists found the remains of people who lived 5,500 years ago. Their DNA is a mixture of two worlds, hunters and early farmers. But the balance here is different, not absorption, but alliance. As if nature herself decided to preserve this people. No other region in Europe has shown such equilibrium. Scientists say, the Basques are the last who have retained the primordial code of Europe. They did not accept foreign blood, but did not completely reject it either. They merely wove it in, like thread into fabric. What if this alliance of ancient lines is the key to understanding why the Basques outlasted everyone? The Pyrenees became their fortress. The mountain valleys isolated settlements, making them almost inaccessible. Here, every clan knew its name for dozens of generations. Here, marriages were contracted within the same valley, and this was not closure. It was a way to survive. 3,000 years of continuity is a rare case in human history. Neither waves of migration nor wars could break this circle. Even Roman roads avoided their villages, as if the very earth protected the silence. The Basques lived slowly, obeying the rhythm of the mountains and the sky above. Their genes remained almost unchanged, as if frozen in time, like crystals in rock. Scientists call this isolation, but perhaps it is simply another form of memory, genetic and eternal. What if this isolation was not a coincidence, but an ancient method of preserving themselves from extinction? Among all the mysteries of the Basques, one particularly astonishes geneticists. Almost 3/4 of men carry the same lineage, R1b DF27. It originated more than 4,000 years ago and has remained almost unchanged to this day. In other countries in Europe, such lineages dissolved, giving way to new migration flows. But not here. Among the Basques, it seems to have frozen, like lava after an eruption, forever. Researchers call this a genetic anchor, preserving the memory of the Bronze Age. There is no randomness in their blood. Every marker is the trace of an ancient father who survived when entire tribes disappeared. This code has been passed down through the centuries, enduring wars, empires, and epidemics. What if within each Basque still lives that very person who walked the stone valleys of Europe 4,000 years ago? Scientists have traced the path of this mysterious lineage. R1b was born 22,000 years ago somewhere in the northern steppes of Eurasia, amid icy winds and nomadic encampments. From there, its bearers moved westward, across plains, through forests, to the Atlantic coast. Wave after wave, generation after generation. In other places, this lineage mixed with others, but in the Pyrenees, it stopped as if it had found a home. Here, at the edge of the continent, the ancient flow has become stagnant, and in the genes of the Basques remains the same formula as that of the first Europeans of the hunting and cold era. Their blood is an archive of migrations, traces of roads lost beneath millennia. What if the roots of the Basques are not in Spain and not in France, but in the very heart of ancient Eurasia, where the history of humanity in Europe began? This same R1b lineage also runs along the Atlantic, among the Bretons, Irish, and Celts. But there it is different, a branch L21, later and already altered by migrations. The Basques, however, preserved the ancient variant, like the imprint of a pre-Indo-European world. Their haplogroup is a bridge between the Caucasus and the ocean, between the steppes and the mountains. Geneticists call this the Atlantic front of Europe. Perhaps it is from here that the first peoples spread to populate the western part of the continent. But the Basques did not leave. They stood still while others moved, and thus remained who they were. What if the Basques are not descendants of anyone, but the original source from which Europe once sprang? They remember those who were before them. Legends speak of the Gentile, giants who lived in the mountains before the advent of Christianity. They built stone temples and raised boulders that today are called dolmens. When the first cross appeared in the valleys, the gentle threw it into the sky and disappeared into the depths of the caves. Archaeologists find these structures throughout the Basque country and date them to the Neolithic, a time when farmers were just beginning to emerge in Europe. Legend and science merge, as if one continues the other. For the Basques, these stones are not just monuments, but a boundary between worlds, the time of gods and the time of men. What if the myth of the giants is not a fabrication, but the memory of a people about their true ancestors? There is a sound unlike any other in Europe. It is the language of the Basques, Euskara. It is not related to Spanish, French, or any Indo-European dialect. Linguists have spent decades trying to find its relatives, comparing it to Georgian, Berber, even Sumerian. But no connection has been found. Euskara seems to have remained from a world that existed before languages. It has no borrowings, only its own roots, as if the words grow from the very earth. This language is a living museum, where neither grammar nor the rhythm of breathing has changed. It sounds as if the mountain itself speaks. What if Euskara is not just a language, but the oldest form of human memory, preserving the voice of Europe before words and alphabets? Scientists recently made a remarkable discovery. The borders of Euskara dialects coincide with the borders of ancient genetic clusters. People who speak the same dialect are closer in DNA than neighbors across the pass. The language literally reflects blood, repeating its lines. Even after centuries of prohibition, after Franco's dictatorship, when a single word in Euskara could land you in prison, the language did not disappear. It lived in homes, in songs, in the whispers of the elderly. Today, around 750,000 people speak it, and it continues to grow. For the Basques, the language is not just a tool, but a breath that connects generations. What if language is indeed the true form of immortality, in which the people continue to live even when everything else dies? The Romans came here with legions, built roads, cities, aqueducts. But in the valleys of the Basques, their speech did not thrive. The Moors brought Islam, trade, science, and also left with no trace. Even during the Reconquista, when Spain spoke the language of Latin chronicles, the Pyrenees remained unyielding. The Basques did not fight for empires. They simply weathered them in the mountains. Their blood did not absorb foreign genes. Their language did not accept foreign words. Historians call this biological independence, but perhaps it was simply stubbornness elevated to sanctity. What if the strength of the Basques lies in their ability to not conquer, but to wait while the enemy departs on their own? The Pyrenees are not just mountains. They are a wall that grew between worlds. For Rome, they were the edge of civilization. For the Moors, a cold barrier on the way to the north. Here roads came to an end. Here armies fell silent. Even the map of Europe seems to break off at these slopes. Scientists studying the genetics of the population call this strip the genetic fault. To the south are traces of Eastern migrations and Arab genes. To the north are Gallic and Celtic markers. And in the middle, between the snows and the clouds, almost nothing. An emptiness. Silence. As if nature itself drew an invisible line here to preserve the ancient code. And for millennia, no one has managed to erase it. The Pyrenees remained a boundary not only geographical, but also biological, cultural, spiritual. What if the Earth itself decided to keep this secret, not allowing empires or time to approach it? Modern DNA research has revealed something unexpected. The genome of the Basques is 70% similar to that of Spaniards and French. But in these figures lies the main difference. The Basques have almost no traces of Arab, North African, and steppe components that are present in their neighbors. Scientists call this selective isolation. Their genetic structure seems to be filtered by nature itself. Even in cities where mixing seemed inevitable, Basque markers remain stable. This is not just a result of geography. It is the habit of a people not to dissolve. Every mutation, every chromosome seems to guard the memory of their ancestors. For geneticists, the Basque country is a laboratory of Europe, where one can see what our continent looked like before the age of migrations. What if it is in this blood, having passed through millennia, that the visage of the ancient European, whom the world has long forgotten, is concealed? When geneticists mapped the haplogroups of Europe, the result was astonishing. The entire territory of the continent, a colorful mosaic of migrations and conquests. But in the Pyrenees, strange spot of stability. Here, lines have hardly changed since the Bronze Age. In these coordinates, time seems to have stopped. Haplogroup R1b remains dominant, while in the rest of Europe, it has been displaced by later waves. Scientists call this phenomenon a genetic island. For historians, it is living proof that isolation can be not a weakness, but a protection. The Basques seem to have learned not to battle history, but to wait it out, like a storm behind a stone wall. What if this island of stability is the last untouched territory of ancient Europe, beyond which time no longer holds sway? The 20th century proved to be a trial for the Basques no less than the Ice Age. A time when steel and ideology attempted to erase what neither the Romans nor the Moors had succeeded in doing. After the Civil War, General Franco banned the Basque language, flags, names, even folk songs. For a single word in Euskara, one could be imprisoned. Yet, neither fear nor repression managed to destroy what was passed down not through books, but through blood and memory. People continued to speak secretly, at home, in the woods, in whispers. In the years of darkness, Basque identity transformed into a form of resistance, not with weapons, but with perseverance. When the dictatorship fell, Euskara once again resonated in schools and streets. The people reclaimed their voice, changing not a whit. What if the strength of the Basques lies in their ability to triumph in silence when words become perilously dangerous? Today, thousands of years later, science once again returns to the Basques their ancient name. Genetic laboratories in Spain, France, and Britain are studying their DNA, and the results are astonishing. The level of genetic homogeneity within the people is one of the highest in the world. At the same time, within the tiny Basque country, local subpopulations emerge. The residents of Gipuzkoa, Navarra, and Biscay exhibit different sublines of the same ancient haplogroups. This means that even among neighboring valleys, isolation of millennia has persisted. Scientists call them a living genetic monument. But the Basques do not see this as a museum. For them, it is proof of survival. They do not cling to the past. They carry it within themselves, like part of their breath. What if the Basques are not just a people, but nature's experiment in how memory can become a form of eternal life? Modern genetics has uncovered a new layer of mysteries. Research conducted in the 21st century compared thousands of DNA samples across Europe. The Basques were found on a separate branch, as if an island cut off from the mainland of history. Their profile does not match that of any modern ethnic group. Haplogroup R1b DF27, about 75%. Lines I2 and G2, about 10. North African E M81, only 2%. The rest are tiny traces of mixing that do not influence the foundation. This combination makes them the closest descendants of the pre-Indo-European population of the continent. For scientists, the Basques are like a time machine, a means to glimpse into Europe of the Stone Age. Their genes reveal what the first inhabitants of the continent were like before languages, before religions, before empires. What if, in studying the Basques, we are not just researching a people but looking into the face of ancient Europe itself? The Pyrenean peaks stand today as they did thousands of years ago. Between them flows the same river, the same wind blows, and the same language, born before time, resonates. The Basques are not an archaic remnant, but living proof that humans can traverse centuries without losing themselves. Their blood carries the imprint of Europe's first hunters. Their words are the breath of ancient caves, their symbols the echoes of the fire that burned at the dawn of civilization. They did not disappear because they never sought to be anything else. They did not need empires to remain eternal. Their strength lies in the simple right to be themselves. In every glance, in every song, in every name resounds the same code that belonged to their ancestors 10,000 years ago. Despite wars, dictatorships, and centuries of oblivion, they preserved themselves. And that is something to be proud of.